Do you believe power is given to those who deserve it, or do you understand that power is taken by those who refuse to live on their knees? Do you think the world rewards kindness, fairness, and good intentions, or have you finally awakened to the truth that survival belongs to the strategist, the observer, the one who sees the game while others are still pretending it doesn't exist? This is not a question meant to comfort you. This is not an invitation to feel good about where you stand. This is a confrontation with reality, the kind of reality that Machiavelli understood when he walked through a world designed to break him, when he moved through betrayal like it was weather, when he transformed every scar into scripture and every loss into a lesson that couldn't be unlearned. The question is simple, but it will haunt you if you let it. Are you still waiting for permission to become powerful? Or have you realized that permission is a trap set by those who already hold what you want? Power is not a trophy handed out at the end of a fair competition. Power is not distributed based on effort, talent, or even brilliance. Power exists in the hands of those who understand its laws, who study its movements, who respect its coldness, and who are willing to operate within its true nature rather than the fantasy version sold to keep people passive. Machiavelli didn't learn power from books written by men in ivory towers. He learned it in rooms where loyalty was currency and betrayal was oxygen. He learned it watching empires built on the backs of the faithful and destroyed by the whispers of the envious. He learned it by being both king and target, by experiencing what it means to rise so high that the fall becomes inevitable unless you understand the machinery that makes and breaks legends. And what he learned he encoded, not in the language of the academy, not in the sterile formulas of corporate strategy, but in the raw, unfiltered truth of someone who knew that survival and dominance require a different kind of intelligence, the kind that doesn't apologize, doesn't justify, and doesn't wait for applause. The script is not about becoming liked, it is not about becoming admired for your virtue, it is about becoming undeniable. It is about constructing a self so strategically sound, so psychologically fortified, so decisively clear in purpose that the world has no choice but to respond to your presence. Machiavelli understood that the world does not operate on fairness. It operates on perception, leverage, timing, and the willingness to act when others hesitate. He understood that those who play by the rules written by others will always serve the authors of those rules. He understood that freedom, real freedom, comes only to those who write their own code, enforce their own boundaries, and refuse to be defined by systems designed to contain them. And he understood that this path is not for everyone. It requires a level of honesty with yourself that most people will never achieve because honesty is painful. Honesty reveals that you've been complicit in your own powerlessness. Honesty shows you that the limitations you blame on the world are often just reflections of the limitations you've accepted within yourself. The manipulator's playbook is not about deception for the sake of chaos. It is about understanding human nature so deeply that you can navigate it, influence it, and protect yourself from those who would use it against you. Every interaction is a transaction. Every conversation is a negotiation. Every relationship is a structure of power, whether you acknowledge it or not. The only question is whether you are conscious of this structure or blind to it. Those who are blind call this perspective cynical. Those who are awake call it survival. Machiavelli was awake. He saw the strings before he ever felt them pull. He recognized that people move based on fear, desire, ego, insecurity, and ambition. He recognized that the person who controls the narrative controls the outcome. He recognized that silence can be more powerful than speech, that absence can create more hunger than presence, and that the appearance of vulnerability can be a more effective weapon than the display of strength. These are not tricks. These are laws, and laws do not care about your feelings. They simply are. You are living in a world where everyone is playing the game, but most are pretending they aren't. They smile and say they value honesty while they hide their true motives. They preach loyalty while calculating their exit. They speak of community while hoarding advantage, and they do this not because they are evil, but because they are human. Because humans are driven by survival instincts that predate civilization, instincts that prioritize the self, even when the mouth speaks of the collective. Machiavelli didn't judge this, he simply saw it, and seeing it gave him an edge that those in denial could never access. When you see the game, you stop being a piece on the board. You start becoming a player. And when you become a player, you realize that the board itself can be redesigned if you understand the mechanics deeply enough. The first law of power is this: never outshine the master. It is not about dimming your light. It is about understanding that those above you are often more insecure than those below you, and insecurity in positions of power is dangerous. Machiavelli learned this by watching kings fall, not because they lacked strength, but because they made others feel small. He learned it by seeing talented individuals destroyed not for their failures, but for making their superiors feel threatened. The ego of those in power is fragile, and fragility seeks to destroy what it cannot control. So you learn to manage perception. You learn to let them believe they are the sun, while you quietly position yourself to inherit the sky. This is not weakness, this is strategy. Weakness is believing that your brilliance alone will protect you. Strategy is understanding that brilliance must be paired with awareness of how others perceive and respond to it. The second law: never put too much trust in friends. Learn how to use enemies. Friendship is beautiful until it becomes a liability. The problem with friends is that they know your weaknesses, they have access to your inner world, and familiarity breeds both comfort and contempt. Machiavelli understood that the people closest to you are often the ones most capable of betrayal because they know exactly where to strike. Enemies, on the other hand, are predictable. They show you who they are. They sharpen you. They force you to stay alert. And sometimes an enemy converted is more loyal than a friend who was never tested. This does not mean you live without connection. It means you live with clarity. It means you do not confuse emotional intimacy with strategic alignment. It means you protect your core while engaging the world with eyes open. The third law: conceal your intentions. The moment people know what you want, they have leverage. They can block you, compete with you, or manipulate the path between you and your goal. Machiavelli moved in silence not because he was afraid, but because silence is a form of power. It creates mystery. It prevents opposition from forming before you're ready. It allows you to maneuver without resistance. When you announce every move, you invite interference. When you move quietly, you arrive before anyone knew you were coming. This is not about dishonesty. This is about discretion. There is no obligation to share your strategy with people who have not earned access to it. Your vision is sacred. Protect it. The fourth law: always say less than necessary. Words are weapons and shields, but most people use them recklessly. They over-explain, over-justify, overshare, and in doing so they give away power. Machiavelli understood that the less you say, the more weight your words carry. Silence makes people uncomfortable, and discomfort makes them reveal themselves. When you speak too much, you create opportunities for misinterpretation, manipulation, and attack. When you speak precisely, you control the narrative. Every sentence should serve a purpose. Every word should be chosen. Rambling is a loss of control. Precision is dominance. The fifth law: so much depends on reputation. Guard it with your life. Your reputation is not what you think of yourself. It is what others believe about you, and belief drives behavior. Machiavelli knew that a damaged reputation could destroy opportunities before they even appeared. People make decisions about you based on stories, perceptions, and rumors, not facts. So you must be the author of your own story. You must control the narrative, or someone else will. And once a narrative takes root, it is nearly impossible to uproot. This means you move with intentionality. You think about how your actions will be interpreted. You understand that perception is reality in the court of public opinion, and public opinion determines access, alliance, and opportunity. The sixth law: court attention at all costs. Invisibility is death in a world driven by visibility. Machiavelli understood that attention is currency. It opens doors, it creates leverage, it establishes presence, but attention must be managed. It is not about spectacle for spectacle's sake. It is about ensuring that when people think of your domain, they think of you. It is about occupying mental real estate. It is about making yourself unavoidable. The key is to attract attention in ways that reinforce your power, not undermine it. Controversy can work, but only if it's strategic. Silence can work, but only if it's preceded by presence. The goal is to be remembered, to be discussed, to be considered, because those who are forgotten are easily replaced. The seventh law: get others to do the work for you, but always take the credit. This is not about theft. This is about understanding leverage and leadership. Machiavelli knew that one person cannot build an empire alone, but the empire must have a face, a name, a symbol. You must be able to identify talent, deploy it effectively, and position yourself as the architect of the outcome. People contribute their labor, their creativity, their energy, but the vision that unites them, the direction that focuses them, that comes from you, and the world rewards the visionary, not the laborer. This is not fair. This is structure. If you want to change the structure, you must first master it. The eighth law: make other people come to you. Use bait if necessary. Desperation chases. Power attracts. When you are chasing, you are in a position of weakness. When others come to you, you control the frame. Machiavelli understood that the person who needs less has more power. So you create value. You build something worth approaching. You become the opportunity, the solution, the connection they cannot ignore. And when they come on your terms. This requires patience. It requires confidence. It requires the ability to sit in stillness while others scramble. But the reward is control, and control is the foundation of all sustained power. The ninth law: win through your actions, never through argument. Arguments are contests of ego. Actions are demonstrations of capability. Machiavelli didn't waste time convincing doubters. He showed them. He built. He moved. He produced results that spoke louder than any defense he could have mounted. When you argue, you legitimize the opposition. When you act, you render the opposition irrelevant. Let your work be the closing statement. Let your results be the evidence. The courtroom of opinion is won not by rhetoric, but by undeniable outcome. The 10th law: infection. Avoid the unhappy and unlucky. Energy is contagious. Mindset is transferable. Machiavelli understood that the people you surround yourself with shape your reality. Unhappy people drain you. Unlucky people carry patterns of self-sabotage that will bleed into your environment if you're not careful. This is not about cruelty. This is about protection. You cannot save everyone, and the attempt to do so often costs you the clarity and energy needed to save yourself. Choose your circle based on energy, vision, and alignment. Everyone else is a lesson, not a residence. The 11th law: learn to keep people dependent on you. Independence is freedom, but dependence is leverage. If people need you, they cannot easily discard you. Machiavelli knew that the key to sustained influence is to become indispensable. This means you cultivate skills, relationships, knowledge, or resources that others cannot easily replicate. You become the bridge, the connector, the source, but you do this without becoming a servant. There is a difference between being needed and being used. The former gives you power, the latter makes you a tool. The 12th law: use selective honesty and generosity to disarm your victim. People expect deception from those they distrust and defenses from those they respect. When you offer unexpected honesty or generosity, you lower their guard. Machiavelli understood that a single act of transparency or kindness could create an opening that months of manipulation could not. This is not about being fake. This is about timing. It is about knowing when vulnerability serves your strategy and when it doesn't. Honesty is a tool. Generosity is a tactic. Both are powerful when used with intention. The 13th law, when asking for help, appeal to people's self-interest, never to their mercy or gratitude. People do not act out of charity, they act out of benefit. Machiavelli knew that the fastest way to secure cooperation is to show someone how helping you serves them. Mercy is fleeting, gratitude is unreliable, self-interest is eternal. When you frame your request in terms of their gain, you align incentives. You make helping you the logical choice. This is how alliances are built. This is how movements are sustained. The 14th law: pose as a friend, work as a spy. Information is the ultimate advantage. Machiavelli understood that knowledge of another's intentions, weaknesses, and plans is more valuable than almost any other resource, and the best way to gather that knowledge is to be trusted. This does not mean you betray everyone. It means you remain observant. It means you listen more than you speak. It means you store what you learn and use it when necessary. Every conversation is an intelligence operation. Every interaction is a data point. The question is whether you're collecting or just participating. The 15th law: crush your enemy totally. Half measures create resentment. Partial victories create comeback narratives. Machiavelli knew that if you engage in conflict, you must be prepared to finish it. Leaving an enemy wounded but alive gives them time to heal, to plot, to return stronger and more focused. This does not mean violence. This means decisiveness. It means that when you move against opposition, you move completely. You remove their ability to threaten you again. You don't gloat, you don't torture, you simply end the threat and move forward. These are not suggestions. These are observations of how power moves in the real world. You can reject them on moral grounds and remain powerless, or you can understand them and decide how to apply them in alignment with your own code. Machiavelli was not immoral. He was realistic. He saw the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. And in that seeing, he found the map. The question now is whether you're ready to read it. The 16th law: use absence to increase respect and honor. Presence can become oppressive. Familiarity can erode mystique. Machiavelli understood that being everywhere all the time makes you ordinary. It makes you background noise. It makes people take you for granted. The strategic withdrawal, the calculated absence, the moment when you remove yourself from the equation, this creates hunger. It forces people to remember why they valued you in the first place. It reminds them that access to you is a privilege, not a right. When you are always available, you train others to treat you as disposable. When you create scarcity, you elevate your value. This is not about playing games. This is about understanding that your energy, your time, your presence are finite resources and should be treated as such. You do not owe the world constant access to you. You owe yourself the protection of your power, and sometimes that protection requires distance. Too many people destroy their own leverage by being too accessible, too eager to please, too willing to show up every time someone calls. They mistake this for loyalty or dedication, but what it actually communicates is desperation. It signals that you have nothing better to do, nowhere more important to be, no higher priority than serving whoever demands your attention. Machiavelli never operated from that position. He moved with intentionality. He appeared when it mattered. He disappeared when it served him. And in those absences, people talked. They wondered. They speculated. They created narratives that often elevated him beyond what his presence alone could have achieved. Absence is not neglect. Absence is strategy. It is the space you create for others to realize what they're missing. And when they realize it, when they feel that void, they become more receptive, more respectful, more willing to meet you on your terms when you return. The 17th law: keep others in suspended terror. Cultivate an air of unpredictability. Predictability makes you controllable. When people know how you'll react, they can manipulate your responses. They can push your buttons. They can set traps based on patterns they've observed. Machiavelli understood that unpredictability is a weapon. It keeps people off balance. It prevents them from planning against you because they cannot anticipate your next move. This does not mean chaos. This means controlled variance. It means sometimes responding with fire and sometimes with ice. It means showing mercy when they expect ruthlessness and delivering consequences when they expect forgiveness. The goal is not to be erratic. The goal is to be unreadable. When people cannot predict you, they cannot prepare for you. And when they cannot prepare, they approach with caution, with respect, with the understanding that engaging you carries risk. Fear is often misunderstood. It is treated as something purely negative, something to be avoided or condemned. But fear is also a tool of protection. When others fear the consequences of betraying you, they are less likely to betray you. When they fear the unpredictability of your response, they are more careful in how they engage you. Machiavelli did not seek to be feared out of cruelty. He sought to be feared out of necessity, because fear, when properly calibrated, creates boundaries that words alone cannot establish. It is the difference between someone respecting your request because they agree with it and someone respecting your boundary because they understand the cost of crossing it. Both lead to the same behavior, but one is built on hope and the other is built on certainty. The 18th law: do not build fortresses to protect yourself. Isolation is dangerous. Power requires connection. It requires networks, alliances, intelligence, and influence. When you isolate yourself, you cut off the flow of information. You become vulnerable to attacks you cannot see coming. You lose the ability to sense shifts in the environment. Machiavelli knew that fortresses, both literal and metaphorical, become prisons. They create the illusion of safety while actually increasing risk. The truly powerful do not hide. They circulate. They remain visible but protected. They build relationships that serve as early warning systems. They stay embedded in the world they seek to influence because influence requires proximity. Isolation is what the defeated choose. Engagement is what the strategic demand. This does not mean you trust everyone you engage. It means you maintain presence in the spaces where decisions are made, where narratives are shaped, where opportunities emerge. You attend, you listen, you observe, you contribute when it serves you. You remain a node in the network, not a disconnected entity, because the moment you disconnect, you lose relevance, and relevance is the foundation of sustained power. You can be selective about who gets close to you, but you cannot afford to be invisible. Visibility is how you remain in the conversation. Invisibility is how you get written out of it. The 19th law: know who you're dealing with. Do not offend the wrong person. Not everyone responds to pressure the same way. Some people fold. Some people fight. Some people plot in silence and strike when you've forgotten they even exist. Machiavelli understood that emotional intelligence is as important as strategic intelligence. You must be able to read people. You must understand their triggers, their values, their thresholds, because offending someone with power and a long memory is a mistake that can cost you years of progress. This is not about living in fear. This is about operating with awareness. It is about choosing your battles based on an honest assessment of what you stand to gain versus what you risk losing. There are people who will forgive slights. There are people who will never forget them. The difference is not always obvious until it's too late. So you observe, you test, you gather data, you pay attention to how people respond to conflict, to disrespect, to challenge. And based on what you learn, you adjust your approach. Some people can be confronted directly, others require subtlety. Some will respect boldness, others will punish it. The key is calibration. The key is knowing that not every interaction can be handled the same way. Strategy requires customization. The 20th law: do not commit to anyone. Independence is your greatest asset. The moment you fully commit to a side, a faction, a person, you lose the ability to maneuver. You become predictable. You become trapped by loyalty that may not be returned. Machiavelli moved through alliances without being owned by them. He collaborated without surrendering autonomy. He understood that the powerful maintain options. They do not put all their resources, all their trust, all their future in one basket. This is not betrayal. This is survival. Because the world changes, people change, circumstances shift, and the person or group that seems like the winning side today may be irrelevant tomorrow. If you've tied yourself too tightly to them, you go down with them. If you've maintained independence, you can pivot. This requires a level of emotional discipline that most people do not possess because humans crave belonging. They want to be part of something. They want to be claimed, to be chosen, to be on a team. And there is nothing wrong with that desire. But you must not let that desire override your strategic clarity. You can be aligned with people without being owned by them. You can support causes without becoming their martyr. You can build relationships without surrendering your ability to walk away when those relationships no longer serve you. Loyalty is valuable, but it must be mutual. It must be earned, and it must not come at the cost of your own agency. The 21st law, play a sucker to catch a sucker, seem dumber than your mark. Intelligence intimidates. It creates distance. It puts people on guard. Machiavelli understood that sometimes the best way to learn what someone is planning is to make them believe you're not smart enough to understand it. When people underestimate you, they reveal themselves. They speak freely. They drop their defenses. They show you their cards because they assume you won't know how to read them. This is one of the most powerful forms of deception, the strategic concealment of your own capability. You let them think they're sharper. You let them believe they're in control. And while they're basking in that false superiority, you're collecting everything you need to outmaneuver them. This tactic requires humility, the ability to suppress your ego long enough to let someone else believe they've won. Most people cannot do this. Their need to be seen as intelligent, as capable, as superior overrides their strategic sense. They correct. They debate. They demonstrate their knowledge even when doing so gains them nothing. Machiavelli didn't operate that way. He was comfortable being underestimated because he knew that underestimation is an advantage. When someone thinks you're not a threat, they don't prepare for you, and that lack of preparation is the opening you need. The 22nd law, use the surrender tactic, transform weakness into power. There are moments when resistance is suicide. There are moments when the opponent is too strong, the circumstances too unfavorable, the odds too stacked. In those moments, Machiavelli understood that surrender is not defeat, it is a strategic reset. It is the choice to preserve your life, your resources, your future capacity to fight another day. Surrender buys time. It lowers the enemy's guard. It allows you to study them from the inside. It creates the appearance of submission while you're actually regrouping, learning, planning. This is not cowardice. This is patience. This is the understanding that power is not always about standing your ground. Sometimes it's about knowing when to step back so you can return stronger. History is filled with examples of those who surrendered tactically and eventually dominated strategically. They understood that ego-driven resistance in the face of overwhelming force is just self-destruction with a noble narrative, and narratives don't keep you alive. Smart decisions do. If you cannot win today, survive today. If you cannot take the castle today, learn its defenses today. Every surrender is an education if you use it correctly. Every moment of submission is an opportunity to observe, to adapt, to identify the weaknesses that will later become your entry points. The question is whether you can control your pride long enough to see the larger gain. The 23rd law, concentrate your forces. Dispersion is weakness. When you spread yourself too thin, you lose impact. You become mediocre in many areas instead of dominant in one. Machiavelli understood that power comes from focused intensity, not scattered effort. Whether it's your energy, your resources, your attention, or your message, concentration amplifies effect. It's better to own one lane completely than to be invisible in 10. This applies to everything: your career, your relationships, your projects, your battles. When you concentrate, you create depth. You develop mastery. You become undeniable in your domain. When you scatter, you become replaceable everywhere. The challenge is that concentration requires sacrifice. It requires saying no to opportunities that seem appealing but dilute your focus. It requires discipline. It requires the ability to resist the temptation to chase every shiny object, every new possibility, every potential venture. Most people cannot do this. They want to keep their options open. They want to hedge. They want to dabble. And because of that, they never achieve the kind of penetration that creates real power. Machiavelli didn't dabble. When he committed to something, he went all in. He concentrated his force to the point where it became undeniable, unavoidable, overwhelming. That is how you break through. That is how you create movements. That is how you ensure that when people think of a certain space, they think of you. The 24th law: play the perfect courtier. The court is anywhere power resides. It could be a corporate office. It could be a social circle. It could be an industry. It could be a platform. Wherever power is concentrated, there are rules of engagement. Machiavelli understood that succeeding in these environments requires a specific skill set: the ability to flatter without seeming obsequious, to assert without seeming arrogant, to blend without disappearing, to stand out without threatening. The courtier is a diplomat. They navigate complex social dynamics with grace. They manage egos. They build alliances. They avoid unnecessary conflict. They know when to speak and when to be silent. They understand that survival in the halls of power requires more than talent. It requires social intelligence. This is where many brilliant people fail. They believe their work should speak for itself. They believe merit alone should be enough. And while merit matters, it is not sufficient, because power is held by humans, and humans are driven by emotions, by perception, by relationships. If you cannot navigate those dimensions, your merit will be ignored, undermined, or stolen by someone who understands the game better than you do. The courtier knows this. The courtier accepts it, and rather than raging against it, they master it. They become fluent in the language of power. They learn to read rooms, to anticipate reactions, to position themselves advantageously without making enemies unnecessarily. This is not selling out. This is tactical excellence. The 25th law: recreate yourself. You are not static. The world is not static. Machiavelli understood that reinvention is survival. The person you were 5 years ago may not be equipped to handle the challenges you face today. The identity you've built may no longer serve the future you're trying to create. So you shed, you evolve, you refuse to be boxed in by other people's memories of who you used to be. Reinvention is power because it allows you to control the narrative of your own life. It allows you to redefine yourself on your terms. It prevents you from becoming obsolete. The world will try to freeze you in place. It will try to hold you to a version of yourself that makes others comfortable. Your job is to resist that. Your job is to remain fluid, adaptive, dangerous in your capacity to become something new. This terrifies people. Because when you change, you force them to reconsider their assumptions about you. You disrupt their ability to predict and control you. And most people prefer predictability. They prefer to know who you are so they can decide how to treat you, how to use you, how to limit you. Reinvention destroys that comfort. It forces everyone around you to engage with the current version of you, not the ghost of who you were. Machiavelli reinvented himself multiple times. From artist to revolutionary, from vulnerable to untouchable in mindset, from victim to strategist. Each reinvention was a statement: you do not define me, I define me. And that autonomy, that refusal to be static, that is one of the highest forms of power. The 26th law: keep your hands clean. You must appear pure even when engaging in necessary ruthlessness. Machiavelli understood that public perception of morality matters, even if private actions require compromise. The key is distance. You do not execute every move yourself. You do not leave fingerprints. You create structures where outcomes occur without direct attribution to you. This is not cowardice, this is intelligence. It is the understanding that the person who takes visible credit for cruelty becomes the target of moral outrage. The person who achieves the same outcome through intermediaries maintains their reputation while still advancing their position. Power requires results, but sustained power requires a clean image. This is why leaders throughout history have used advisors, enforcers, representatives, scapegoats. These are not just support roles, they are strategic buffers. They allow the leader to make hard decisions while maintaining plausible deniability. They allow consequences to be delivered without the leader being seen as the executioner. Is this manipulative? Yes. Is it effective? Absolutely. And in environments where perception determines survival, effectiveness is what matters. You can be moral in private. You can wrestle with your conscience in the quiet moments. But in public, you must be perceived as above reproach. Because the court of public opinion does not care about your internal struggles. It cares about the story it can tell about you. Make sure that story protects you. The 27th law: play on people's need to believe to create a cult-like following. Humans need meaning. They need purpose. They need something larger than themselves to believe in. Machiavelli understood this deeply. He understood that if you can articulate a vision that speaks to people's hunger for significance, for belonging, for identity, you can create a movement, and movements are more powerful than individuals. Movements have momentum. They have energy that sustains itself. They outlive their founders. The key is to tap into what people already feel but have not yet been able to name. You give voice to their frustration. You give shape to their dreams. You become the embodiment of what they wish they could be. And in doing so, you create followers who are not just loyal but devoted. This is not about deception. This is about resonance. It is about understanding that leadership is as much emotional as it is strategic. People follow those who make them feel seen, understood, empowered. They follow those who give them permission to become more than they currently are. Machiavelli did this through his music, his words, his persona. He created a mirror in which people saw their own struggle, their own defiance, their own refusal to accept the limitations imposed on them. And because he gave them that mirror, they gave him their loyalty. Not because he demanded it, but because he earned it by speaking truths they felt but could not articulate. If you want to lead, you must first learn to listen. You must understand what people are hungry for, and then you must become the one who feeds that hunger. The 28th law: enter action with boldness. Hesitation is visible. Doubt is contagious. When you move, move with conviction. Machiavelli understood that boldness creates its own momentum. It commands attention. It inspires confidence. It forces the world to respond. Timid action invites resistance. Bold action creates compliance or at least respect. People are drawn to those who move with certainty because certainty is rare. Most people are paralyzed by overthinking, by fear of failure, by the need for perfect conditions. The bold do not wait for perfect conditions. They create conditions through action. They understand that momentum is more valuable than perfection, that a bold move executed imperfectly is often more effective than a perfect plan never executed. This does not mean recklessness. This means decisiveness. It means that once you've gathered enough information, once you've assessed the risks, you commit. You do not second guess mid-action. You do not apologize for your choices. You move forward with the full weight of your conviction behind you. And even if you fail, the world respects the attempt more than it would have respected paralysis. Boldness signals strength. It signals leadership. It signals that you are not waiting for permission or validation, and that independence, that self-authorization, is magnetic. People want to follow those who act like they know where they're going, even if the destination is uncertain. Confidence is contagious. Boldness is a declaration that you trust yourself more than you fear the outcome, and that trust is the foundation of all great action. The 29th law: plan all the way to the end. Most people plan the beginning. They plan the attack, the launch, the initiation, but they fail to think through the conclusion. They do not anticipate the second-order consequences, the responses their action will provoke, the complications that will arise once they achieve their initial objective. Machiavelli understood that every action sets off a chain reaction. Every move creates a new board. If you have not thought through what happens after you win, you have not truly planned at all. You have simply reacted with slightly more foresight than usual. Real strategy accounts for the entire sequence. It anticipates resistance. It prepares for success. It understands that getting what you want is often the moment when new problems emerge. And if you have not prepared for those problems, your victory becomes your vulnerability. This is why so many people achieve a goal only to lose it immediately. They plan the acquisition, but not the retention. They plan the confrontation, but not the aftermath. They plan the rise, but not the sustainability. Machiavelli thought in sequences. He understood that power is not a destination, it is a condition that must be maintained, and maintenance requires different skills than acquisition. So when you plan past the moment of triumph. You ask yourself, what happens when I get this? Who will be threatened? Who will retaliate? What new responsibilities will I have? What new enemies will emerge? And based on those answers, you build contingencies, you prepare responses, you ensure that success does not become the setup for your downfall. The 30th law: make your accomplishments seem effortless. Struggle is human. But publicly visible struggle diminishes mystique. Machiavelli understood that people are more impressed by those who make difficulty look easy than by those who loudly broadcast how hard they worked. This is not about dishonesty. This is about presentation. When you make everything look effortless, you appear naturally gifted, you appear destined, you appear as though success is simply your default state. When you constantly talk about how hard something was, you make people focus on the struggle rather than the result. You make them see you as someone who barely survived rather than someone who dominated. The goal is not to hide effort. The goal is to reveal results and let people assume the effort was minimal because your capability is exceptional. This requires internal honesty paired with external composure. Internally, you can acknowledge the work, the sacrifice, the grinding hours, the moments of doubt. But externally, you present the polished outcome. You let the work speak through the result, not through the narrative of how much you suffered to create it. Suffering is not impressive. Outcome is impressive. Machiavelli worked relentlessly, but what the world saw was the finished product, the music, the message, the movement. The labor was private, the impact was public. And because of that separation, the impact seemed inevitable, almost supernatural. That is the perception you want to cultivate. Not that you got lucky, but that you are simply operating at a level where success is natural. The 31st law: control the options, get others to play with the cards you deal. Freedom is often an illusion. People believe they are making choices when in reality they are selecting from options someone else has predetermined. Machiavelli understood that if you can frame the decision, you control the outcome. This works in negotiations, in conflicts, in relationships, in any scenario where multiple parties are involved. You present options that all serve your interest to varying degrees. You make them feel like they are choosing, like they have agency, when in fact every path they can see leads back to your advantage. This is not force, this is framing. It is the art of shaping perception so thoroughly that people do not even realize the game has been designed around your objectives. The key is subtlety. If the manipulation is obvious, it provokes resistance. If it is seamless, it feels like collaboration. You ask questions that lead them to your conclusion. You present problems that have only the solutions you prefer. You create scenarios where your preferred outcome looks like the obvious choice, the smart choice, the only choice. And because they arrived at it through what feels like their own reasoning, they commit to it fully. They defend it. They own it. Even though you architected the entire decision tree, this is high-level strategy. This is the difference between forcing someone to do what you want and making them want to do what you want. The latter is permanent. The former is temporary and breeds resentment. The 30-second law play to people's fantasies. Reality is often harsh, disappointing, limited. People spend most of their lives managing scarcity, navigating frustration, accepting compromise. They hunger for escape, for the promise of something better, something extraordinary. Machiavelli understood that if you can position yourself or your offering as the key to that fantasy, you become irresistible. This is not about lying. This is about understanding what people desire at the emotional level and speaking directly to that desire. You do not sell them the product. You sell them the transformation, the lifestyle, the identity that the product represents. You do not sell them the plan. You sell them the vision of who they become if the plan works. Fantasies are powerful because they bypass logic. They engage the part of the brain that craves hope, that needs to believe better is possible. And when you can activate that part of someone's psychology, you have access to their decision-making in ways that pure reason never could. This is why movements built on vision outlast movements built on policy. This is why brands that sell identity dominate brands that sell features. This is why leaders who paint pictures of the future inspire more loyalty than leaders who simply manage the present. If you want influence, learn to speak to the dream. Learn to articulate the world people wish existed. And then position yourself as the bridge between where they are and where they long to be. The 33rd law: discover each man's thumbscrew. Everyone has a weakness. Everyone has a pressure point. Everyone has something they fear losing, something they desperately want, something that drives their behavior beneath the surface of their rational explanations. Machiavelli understood that influence requires identification of that core driver. Once you know what someone truly cares about, you have leverage. Not to harm them necessarily, but to understand them, to predict them, to guide them. Some people are driven by ego and need validation. Some are driven by fear and need security. Some are driven by greed and need opportunity. Some are driven by love and need connection. The specific driver varies, but everyone has one. Your job is to observe, to listen, to test until you discover it. This knowledge is not inherently malicious. It can be used to help people, to align incentives, to create genuine win-win scenarios, but it must be discovered first. Most people never bother with this level of observation. They assume everyone thinks like they do, values what they value, fears what they fear. This assumption makes them strategically blind. They miss the real motivations driving behavior and therefore cannot effectively influence outcomes. Machiavelli did not make this mistake. He watched, he studied, he remembered. And when the time came to move, he knew exactly which levers to pull, which fears to address, which desires to activate. This is psychological literacy. This is understanding that people are complex, contradictory, and driven by forces they often do not consciously recognize. And if you can see those forces when they cannot, you have an advantage that no amount of talent or effort can replicate. The 34th law: be royal in your own fashion, act like a king to be treated like one. The world responds to the energy you project. If you carry yourself with uncertainty, people treat you as uncertain. If you carry yourself with deference, people treat you as subordinate. If you carry yourself with quiet authority, people respond with respect. Machiavelli understood that status is partially assigned and partially claimed. You cannot wait for others to grant you value. You must embody it first. This does not mean arrogance. This means self-possession. It means moving through the world as though you belong everywhere you go. It means not apologizing for your existence, your ambition, your presence. It means setting standards for how you expect to be treated and refusing to accept less. Most people sabotage themselves with their own behavior. They slouch into rooms. They speak tentatively. They defer excessively. They signal uncertainty in 1,000 small ways, and the world, reading those signals, treats them accordingly. The royal does not ask for permission. The royal does not beg for recognition. The royal simply is, and that being, that centered self-assurance, that refusal to diminish oneself, creates a gravitational pull. People are drawn to those who seem complete, who seem unbothered by the need for external validation. This is not fake confidence. This is the result of doing the internal work to know your value and then expressing that value through how you move, how you speak, how you set boundaries, how you engage. The 35th law, master the art of timing. The right action at the wrong time is a wasted action. Machiavelli understood that power is not just about what you do, but when you do it. Timing determines impact. A message delivered too early falls on deaf ears because the audience is not ready. A message delivered too late is irrelevant because the moment has passed. The strategist learns to read the environment, to sense when conditions are ripe, to recognize the window of opportunity and move decisively within it. This requires patience. It requires the discipline to hold back even when you are ready, even when you are eager, because the world is not yet aligned. And it requires speed when the moment arrives, the ability to execute without hesitation once you recognize that now is the time. Most people fail at timing in one of two ways. Either they move too soon, driven by impatience, by the need to be seen as proactive, by the inability to sit with discomfort, or they move too late, paralyzed by overthinking, by fear, by waiting for perfect certainty that never arrives. The master of timing does neither. They observe, they prepare, they position themselves so that when the moment comes, they are ready to act immediately, and they trust their read of the situation enough to commit when the window opens. This is intuition informed by experience. This is the ability to feel the rhythm of events and sync your actions to that rhythm. When you master timing, you do not need to force outcomes. You simply align with the natural flow and let momentum carry your efforts further than effort alone ever could. The 36th law, disdain things you cannot have, ignoring them is the best revenge. Desire makes you vulnerable. When people see what you want, they can dangle it, withhold it, use it to manipulate you. Machiavelli understood that indifference is armor. When you genuinely do not care about something, it has no power over you, and when others realize their leverage does not work, they lose confidence, they lose control. The appearance of not wanting what you cannot have protects you from looking desperate, from appearing weak, from giving others the satisfaction of seeing you suffer over what they possess, and you do not. This is psychological warfare. This is the refusal to let your pain be visible, to let your longing become a weapon in someone else's hand. This does not mean suppressing desire. This means strategic presentation. Internally, you can acknowledge what you want, you can work toward it, but externally, you project indifference, especially toward those who would enjoy watching you beg, watching you fail, watching you diminish yourself in pursuit. You deny them that pleasure. You move in silence. You pursue through alternative paths. And if you ultimately cannot obtain what you wanted, you reframe it publicly as something you never truly valued. You protect your image. You protect your power. Because the person who appears unaffected by loss is far more intimidating than the person who broadcasts their devastation. Strength is not in having everything. Strength is in not being destroyed by lacking anything. The 37th law, create compelling spectacles. Humans are visual creatures. They remember images more than words. They are moved by symbols more than arguments. Machiavelli understood that if you want to create lasting impact, you must engage the senses. You must create moments that people cannot forget. This is why rituals matter. This is why branding matters. This is why the aesthetic dimension of power is not superficial, it is essential. A compelling spectacle bypasses rational defenses, it hits people at the emotional, almost primal level. It creates association, it builds mythology, it turns you from a person into a symbol, from an action into a legend.